Everything every day, he'd rather be on the water.
I've seen you operate an iPhone, mate. Yeah, it's tragic. He's itching.
He
comes to the booth. He's
What's
itching.
going on, Rob? What's going on? It's like he's racing the boat.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Inside Tack, proudly brought to you by Athena Racing. My name is Freddie Carr, Howden ambassador, and they are a proud supporter of Emirates GBR SailGP team. Now, as you know, with Inside Tack, we bring you all things Athena Racing. Our biggest focus right now is obviously SailGP. One of the key members, and I think probably the dad of the team, let's say, is Robbie Wilson, the coach. Robs, how are you, mate? Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, very good. Pleased to be here. Looking forward to having a bit of a yarn with you.
A bit of a yarn. Dad of the team, that actually is probably a bit harsh. But I think, Rob, that kind of reflects where your coach's role is now with SailGP. You're not just a technical coach talking about boat speed, talking about tactics, talking about start line strategy. Would it be fair to say that with this group and coaching in sailing specifically now, you really have to be all encompassing, all around, let's put it in air quotes, like the energy of the team as well?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how these roles sort of develop and they go, the priorities sort of ebb and flow a little bit with time. I would say, when I we started the season, a lot of the gains were coming from boat handling and the performance side. So it was all a lot of technical input. But as the teams all get closer and closer, I think there's a lot more about, the racing skills, starting, and also the team dynamic and making sure the team works well together. Depending on who you've got in the team, what their strengths are. I think the input of the coaching team can be can change from sort of even from event to event.
Yeah, and talking about kind of team dynamics, what every coach wants is consistency within a team in terms of personnel, because then you can bed down that dynamic, bed down that energy. Now, it's safe to say for you, in the last end of season 4, going into season 5, if we wound back probably 15 to 18 months, you've had to deal with 3 different helmsmen with the same group in front of them and behind them with Hannah, but you've had Ben Ainslie driving, then Giles Scott driving at the end of season 4, and now Dylan Fletcher. How, as a coach, have you managed that with those 3 pretty different personality types joining a group that's already established with a set playbook, be it tactical, performance, and communication-wise?
It's been super interesting, and I think it's not only the characters that are involved, in helming the boat. The one thing we have had is consistency with the crew around them that's helped massively. But it's also, I think, that the other distractions that are going on around them doing their role. Right. And the amount of time you have to put into developing the sailing as well. Certainly with Ben in the early days, there was, we were in the thick of it with the America's Cup side and with Giles as well. So there was probably slightly less time, to have meetings around the SailGP events. We still had them, but it was certainly, we had to be slightly more efficient in that respect. Whereas I'd say now, we can really focus on SailGP and we can put a lot more time and energy into it. We're not having to sort of share that with other distractions. With Ben and Giles, there was a lot going on with the Cup as well.
Yeah, sure.
So we spent a lot of time on SailGP, but we had to be really efficient with that time. Whereas with Dylan, Cup's much quieter. So we have a lot of time with the whole group to be looking into tactics, strategy, the team dynamic. So that's been really nice. I guess going back to your original question, like how did we adapt? Like, at the end of the day, they're all super driven sailors, which makes it, I wouldn't say easy, but it certainly makes it easier. And when you've got that consistency of the squad around, that again, it certainly helps when you're changing one of the key roles. So we'll have our sort of our priorities documents, and you just adapt them depending on the strength of the helm that's coming into, or the strengths of the helm that's coming into that role.
That was good. That's great. That was going to be my next question, is just how much there's an Emirates GBR playbook, be it boat handling, performance, communication wise, tactical. How much have you had to tweak each individual playbook for the helmsman? I presume like the boat handling side, as you see across all of the boats on the fleet, they're all in that very last percentile now. I really struggle to see the difference in boat handling stuff. With maybe answering my own question, I guess the biggest one is communication. That must be like the biggest hurdle with all the individuals to change.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think you have sort of answered your own question a little bit there. Communication certainly like a big part of it, and it's also, depending on the helm, they might be more willing to take on slightly more or less roles, and then from the people around them, I think they're also looking for more or less comms. So that's been one of the sort of bigger tweaks between the sailors, between the different helms. I think the other thing is, so although Dylan did season 1, I think the starting level has moved on massively since then. And so, there's stuff you learn with the other helms, but you can't tell that kind of stuff. To some extent, you've got to go out there, you've got to experience it, you've got to try different things. Different helms will be, I think, comfortable in different situations, and the amount of risk they're willing to take on. And so, to some extent, you can sort of say this was our playbook on starts or on tactics from with Ben. But, until Giles or Dylan goes out there and experiences that racing, gets a feel for it themselves and finds their limits, then, it's quite hard to tell in those situations, and you have to... you really have to let them feel their way, and then I think like now is actually a really good time for the group to sort of sit back with Brazil being cancelled, and just sort of say, right, okay, well, what have we learned to date? How can we personalize this playbook to the squad as it is now, as opposed to just sort of shoehorning Ben's playbook that then sort of converted to Giles's playbook and then converted to Dylan's. What's your playbook, Dylan? Like, so he's totally owning it.
So we're in this period of time where we've finished the California events. We're five events in. We were meant to be heading to Rio. Our next event is now going to be in New York, so a few weeks away yet. So you're using that time to actually have a breath and kind of reflect on the first 5 events, seeing the growth of the team, where you can get better, where you think you're happy with, and putting you on the front foot for bouncing back in New York.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's we were, I think the whole team was super keen to get out to Brazil. It would have been a great racing stadium, especially after the Olympics. And quite a few members of the team have got super fond memories of that race course. So we wanted to get out there, but in a way I think it's been quite good because it's given us time to just sit back, really have a good look at the playbooks in starts, tactics, strategy, boat setup, boat handling, and sort of say, right, where has the fleet got to? What can we learn from them? Where has our group got to? Where do we think we can make improvements? And when everyone's remote, it takes a little bit of time to organise that.
Yeah.
But I think it's been a really productive use of time, actually.
And Rob, without giving too much away, what does that actually look like? You all, because we've obviously got people all around the world, as you said, we've got the Aussies down in Australia and Dylan in Barcelona, the Brits up here. Do you all dial in? Obviously, there's an agenda to the meeting, but do you literally watch races together and go, right, actually, I wish we'd done that there, or the communication going into that cross, I wasn't really sure whether we were going to duck and go right, or whatever that looks like, or is it more structured than that?
I guess often between the guys in the booth, we'll provide a bit of structure to those meetings. But sometimes, like you say, it's actually good just to put on the racing. I'll have a list of key points, and then maybe, Hannah will have a few decisions that she was like, oh, I'd really like to look in on that and check the comms that led up to that decision-making process. And then we'll just watch the kind of key race moments. Starts, we'll have a good look at the starts and get any data prepared beforehand. And the same with the handling and the performance side. I guess that in the organisation side, we'll kind of split it down into areas. That's I think like you would in any team, because there's such a lot of stuff you could look through, and after an hour and a half of looking at, I think the sort of attention levels start to dip, and you need a little break, and then you go again, and you can go on a new area, or you might need to sort of sit back and say, okay, we've learnt what we can. Let's go away, dig into certain things further, and then hopefully come up with some conclusions.
And here's $1 million question for you. Before you go into it, you've said you got your little bullet points about what you've observed. Do you go into those captures or debriefs kind of knowing the answers to your own questions and wanting them to get to the same point that you're thinking? Or are you quite happy for it to kind of spread out and the team organically grow? Or do you feel quite often you have quite a strong point you want to get across and that has to be the last word?
I think the best result is generally if it can organically grow, because then you're certainly getting buy-in from the team. If you tell and you haven't shown the backing behind your findings, I don't think it has the same impact. So the best thing is we just had a performance meeting, and we've got a load of bullet points we want to talk about, and then just let it flow. But just you got to make sure you get some conclusions at the end. I think it's a slightly less efficient time-wise way of doing things, but I think you get a better result.
And are you still living in the world where you're looking for people to disagree with each other and disagree well, and people kind of challenging each other on the way they've seen the race or how they can move forward? You've always been an advocate for actually people challenging each other, which is quite a brave way of coaching, I think.
Yeah, again, I think that can make it a little bit harder, and it can take slightly longer, but I think you get a more balanced group of a balanced opinion, on certain subjects. I think if you go in and you tell, or you just have someone dominating the discussions, you don't use the expertise of the group.
Yeah.
And so I think it is super important if you can get that input, even from someone who might be quieter, I'm sure they'll have a real good, very good input, and especially when everyone in that boat, they're quite different roles.
Yeah. And really different personalities, I think, you have on that boat across the 6 sailors that push off the dock and the shore crew and the Athena Pathway sailors. It's a real melting pot of people, which is great fun. And it is always a good energy in there, but it must take a little bit of steering from you and your other coaches.
Yeah, the great thing is, like you said, there's a lot of energy in that group, and everyone's super driven. Which is real nice to see. For sure there's different characters, but I think that's the strength of of teams, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Just using the strengths of those different characters. But yeah, I think like it's, you know, you've got experts in their area, and I can look at wing data, for example, but I won't have the same feel as Goobs has, you know, because he's been doing it for so long, and he's got such a good feel for the boat. I can sort of show him what I'm seeing in the data, and when that marries up with what he's feeling, you know, then I think we know we're on the right track.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Parko in that pilot role. You know, he's been doing it a long time, and he's very good in that role. And if the data is kind of matching up to what he's feeling, then again, you know you're going in the right direction.
And Robs, we're 5 events in. From those 5 events, 3 podiums, 1 event win, 1 4th place, a tricky outing in San Francisco a few weeks ago, but 1 point off the lead behind the Australians overall. If I'd said that to you after 5 events going into season 5, you'd have bitten my hand off, right?
Yeah, like I guess going into this this season, I knew the team had good potential. But it's still a big ask for effectively a new helm to join a new bunch of people, and to be in the chocolates, you know, in the top sort of 2 or 3. So you know, I kind of quietly thought they could do very well with the individuals and the team we've got. But you know, it's great to see how they are going.
And you must be, although San Francisco, as we've alluded to, with their 7th place was their worst result so far, to look holistically at the bigger picture, you're happy with how the team is growing from like the season opener to where we are now? Does it feel like a big progression, even though maybe the result in San Fran didn't reflect it?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, and I think the great thing has been how they've actually responded to San Francisco.
Okay, what do you mean by that, chap? Like, what have they done that stood out to you there?
Well, I get, you know, San Francisco. It was a 7, you know, which they were, you know, disappointed with. They felt they left quite a lot of points on the table. But actually, the response since then, we've had quite a few meetings, quite a few individual catch-ups, and you know, everyone's sort of, no one's shying away from the result, and I think everyone's sort of putting their hands up, sort of saying, well, I think I could have done this better. I think we can move this area forward, and it's then just bringing together all those different areas, all that feedback, into some sort of clear action points going forward, and having that extra time between San Fran and New York with Brazil off the calendar, I think has been quite helpful. You know, again, I think with SailGP, it's such tight racing. There's 12 really good teams. So you always are going to have slight ups and downs. And I think it's often how you respond to those setbacks, which will sort of set apart those people that make the grand final and don't at the end of the season. Because there's some jeopardy involved in the racing that is a little bit out of your control. But you've just got to work on the fact that there's so many races that will come under control by the.
I agree, and I think with my sports pundit hat on here and not talking on behalf of Emirates GBR, I think that there's six teams that look very, very good, and those 6 teams you can look on the leaderboard and draw your own conclusions. But I would be amazed if of those 6 teams, I would expect all of them to have one sticky regatta, be that for whatever reason, be it for maybe gear failure or just a tough regatta like we just had. I think, as you said, Rob, there is some level of jeopardy and unknown where if you finish in the top call it 5 or 6 all season, you will be in that grand final. And if you do that, hats off to you. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if every team will be able to do that. And that's just the strength of the league, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, I think any team out there can win a race.
Correct.
But then, you know, there's probably a little bit of a kind of lead group that, you know, I guess have slightly more consistency.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
But, you know, we've just got to make sure that we take away the learnings from San Fran. And it's actually been a really good process for the team just to sort of come together as a group and take away the learnings and move forward.
Right, I'm going to ask you what the learnings are now, mate. Like looking into, let's call it the second half of the season or after this break for the wing breakage. What do you think is going to make the difference? What do you think is across not just Emirates GBR, but across the whole fleet? Where are the areas where you're like, they can tighten up their shoelaces there, and that'll all make a big difference?
Well, the obvious one in San Fran was the starts. You know, it was we just went a little bit high risk, and then we had a few little boat handling slip ups at critical moments. That, you know, it wasn't down to any individual. It was a sort of combination of factors. And, you know, on that course in San Francisco, even though it was a relatively big course, with the wind speed, you know, you had to be getting to your target numbers upwind. And if you were in the pack at that bottom gate, you know, it was very, very hard to pass.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Yeah, it was a real dogfight.
And so, you know, so number one is certainly the starts. And I think all the teams are looking at that. And it's tricky. There is a bit of jeopardy in there. But, you know, there's certain strategies and different conditions that will improve your odds of being in a decent place at Mark 1.
Right.
And San Fran, we for one reason and another, we ended up just going a little bit too high risk.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been really good. I think all teams do this. You know, they'll have an event and they'll be like, oh my God, we couldn't start. It's an absolute shocker. And they'll go away and they'll look at the plans. And I think also the fleet as a whole will go away and they'll look after a day of racing and sort of say, oh, well, you know, this approach really worked well. And then you get the fleet all trying to adapt their approach to what worked that day. But then suddenly you've got so many boats there in that position. Yeah. You're kind of behind the ball. So you've almost got to sort of second guess where the fleet's going to go and how you're going to react to that.
It's very dynamic, isn't it? It is, and it's such an important part of the race. So you can look at historical data of what worked at a certain venue and certain wind speed, push your crew off the dock going, I think we should try this. As a coach sitting in the booth with all of the live television, all of the data coming to you and watching the racing live, how much do you input in between races and say, guys, the boat that led at Mark 1 launched from this spot of the line by a late approach or defending early or whatever? How much power do you have to feed back around live starting strategy on the day?
I think now we've got a good bunch in the booth. We've got Nick Robbins and Ben Cornish.
Yeah.
So we were able to spread the roles out more. Like previously,
talk us through who does what then, Robs, in the booth whilst you're
racing. Basically, Corn Dog. He's got a great racing background. He's sailed with Dylan in the AC40 as well. You know, as opposite helm when we were doing two boating back in Barcelona. So, you know, they've got a good relationship. So Ben can help out on the sort of tactical and strategy. He's also monitoring the ump app.
Right.
And that's just a way to, you know, like, even though primarily the boat is looking for issue boats, you know, if you hit another boat, it's potentially a season ender because you're not only out of that event, you're getting damage points at that event and you're getting season points.
Yeah. Look at Germany and Sydney, right, on a practice day.
Yeah,
Oh.
even on the practice day. So we've kind of got the booth as a firm backstop for any issues. There's certain things you can't do so much on, like if you're coming into a leeward gate, generally the team will have a good vision of who's around them, but it's the sort of tricky crosses, when
Yeah.
maybe they've been caught out by someone tacking short, for example, and they're not expecting a tack, and so the booth ends up being a backstop
I'm
to
just
pick.
thinking, sorry to interrupt, I'm just thinking of Cornish. This is a man who's a fantastic sailor in his own right, as you said, but I have known him to spend his Saturday afternoons on a day off watching TP52 racing, not where there's live images of the boats, but Cornish will spend an afternoon watching the lines.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like, so he's the perfect guy for that job. He's such a sailing geek. He will watch like laser medal races from 19 to sort of 2004 and go back to wind shifts on these lines that he's watching.
yeah. He loves it.
He does love
He
it.
gets so into the racing.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I love
He,
it.
he. I think if you ask him, like, would he rather be on the water or in the booth? I think every day he'd
He'd
rather
be
be
on
on
the
the
water.
water.
It'd actually be at the driving range, but that's another story
Yeah,
altogether.
for sure. But he's been a great asset. He's a awesome guy to have in the team.
Talk about
He's a
energy. He brings the energy, right?
lot of energy, a lot of
Yeah.
fun, and just sort of lightens the mood. He's a real nice sort of balancing character. So he's there. He's in the booth. He's like a tactical, strategic backstop.
Yeah.
And he's also monitoring the UMPAT for any issue boats. But then also, when you get into a zone of a boundary, you can zoom in on the UMPAP and you can give a little bit more detail. And the same for the mark rounding. So he's kind of covering that side. Nick,
And Nick, just to interrupt again, Rob, Nick was a helmsman for Athena Pathway Youth AC in Barcelona. And you kind of saw the work he did there, looking at how he analysed how the AC40 sail and plucked him out of that group to join you in the booth on the back of his data analysis, right?
yeah, exactly. Again, he's got a really strong sailing background. He totally gets it, but he's also got some amazing technical skills. So for Nick, we plucked him out of the sort of pathway program, which I'm sure he'll get involved in the future as well. But he's helping us on the performance side, because he's got some really good software skills that I can't do, and stuff that would take
I've seen
him
you operate an iPhone, mate. Yeah, it's tragic.
half an hour. It would take him half an hour, and it would take me 2 or 3 hours.
Days,
So
yeah.
we've got the clever young buck, and he's generally monitoring the performance side, but he's also keeping track of the wind cow side, and anything else that we're like, hey Nick, we need someone clever to do this. He can take that on, and then I can just sit back and relax. To be honest,
You've really
Let us
undersold
get on with
yourself
it.
there, mate. Oh, I love it.
We like, for me, like, again, it's just watching the overall sort of strategy tactics side,
Yeah.
and then also have a chance to quickly review starts as well.
You're being very self-deprecating there, Rob. You are being very self-deprecating. And I know this is a whole new world of coaching where you're no longer out in a chase boat and buzzing up alongside alongside the F50 in between races. And there's been a lot spoken about this new coaching world where you're an NFL sideline coach, not in the thick of it on the water. Real simple question. Do you enjoy it?
I love being out on the water. That's why I got into sailing. But you have so much information in the booth. You've got the video feeds, the UMPAP, you've got their wing display, you've got videos from every angle, and usually you have a fairly good view of the race course. So you can do a much better job in the booth than you can in a chase boat with none of that technology, or a quarter of that technology. So it is, and especially when you got a good bunch around you, maybe a little bit lonely on yourself, but when you got Cornish and Nick there with you as well, it's different, but it's I still enjoy it.
Do you know what? I rather enjoy it when you get a guest appearance in there. There is a fourth member of that crew that pops up every so often, isn't there? And I rather enjoy it. And I'm obviously talking about Ben. Ben struts up and down the shore side of things in the adrenaline lounge like a nervous, I don't know. I mean, he's obviously the syndicate head, and he walks up and down. And if things aren't quite going quite right, he's itching. He comes to the booth. He's itching.
What's going on?
He's itching not to get in the mix and cause a kerfuffle, and he doesn't get in the way. But he's like, right, okay, Fred's, I'm going to go in and see what's going on. And off he goes and puts on his cans. Rob, what's going on? What's going on? It's absolutely brilliant. He wants to be out there still, doesn't he?
100%. He wants to be out there, and he's passionate about it.
Oh, is he ever?
It's like he's racing the boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's he's definitely not a hindrance. It's generally a help with the advice he gives.
Yeah. No, I must say it is one of my more enjoyable things watching him itching to get involved but trying to be professional and talk to these people, and then he's like, oh, they've had a bad first reach, I'm going to go in and see what's going on. And good on him. Still got the fire, that is for sure. Robs, so going to New York, you've done SailGP events there, America's Cup World Series events there, and then mate, we are going to Portsmouth. Now Portsmouth hasn't hosted a event of this magnitude since 2015 and 2016 with the America's Cup World Series there. We've both got really fond memories of that moment in time. I think over the weekend there was 40,000 people in Portsmouth. You're expecting a similar, if not bigger, crowd for this new version of stadium racing on the F50s, right?
Yeah, like it'll be so nice to get back home, get back to the UK. I think we've all spent a lot of time racing around Portsmouth, and you never quite know what the UK conditions will throw at you at that time of year.
Yeah,
it could be 25 knots and raining, or it could be a beautiful sea breeze and a sunny day and 15 knots. So yeah, we're looking forward to that for sure. And New York as well. It's a good course. When we did the America's Cup World Series, it was right up the river.
Oh man, yeah.
And we had the wind blowing across the river, didn't we? And it was all over the place. It was horrendous. But touch wood, down the river, certainly last year we got some pretty good conditions.
Yeah. And then you're after Portsmouth, you're into the thick of the European stage of the tour, and then ending up with the season finale, mate. I'd like to ask you how you're going to set up the team for all those different venues, but there's so many contrasting race courses, conditions. You just, I know it's a boring thing, but you've just got to take one day, one race, one venue at a time, right, and just piece it together.
Yeah, well, I think it's been quite an interesting season today. Dubai, we started off with the older foils, and it was kind of light, marginal, real modi stuff. New Zealand was a super tight race course, but pretty windy, so it did give you options. Australia, you suddenly had Shark Island in the middle of the course. And so, that was quite an interesting one to deal with on the start and upwind, downwind. LA, quite light, and on the HSB2s was suddenly like, whoa, how do we sail these downrange? And then San Fran was kind of that drag racy stuff where you had to get out the start well. So we've had a real mixed bag already. I think it's going to be quite interesting when we get to the first sort of real light wind events, and who goes well there. There's so many different bits of kit, so many different kit combinations.
Yeah, right.
You've got to adapt pretty quickly in these boats.
And talking about the new boards, these new T-foils, have you been impressed with how quickly all the teams have got to a similar-ish level with those?
Yeah, like you look across the fleet and there's still differences in boat handling. But I think people have settled down with them relatively quickly, which is sort of testament to how good the fleet generally is. yeah, but I'm sure there'll be more to come.
Yeah.
You know, we're refining. All the teams are refining, and it will just get closer and closer. I'm sure
It is going to get closer and closer, and maybe from my side, maybe a bit disrespectfully talking about the two leagues, the two groups of six. I'm sure by the end of the season that's not going to be the case at all. And we've talked about anyone from the front six could win an event. Maybe at the end of the season 5 we're eating our own words there, because the speed of development across the whole fleet is something to behold, and ultimately that means everyone gets to Mark 1 closer together, and it's going to be even more hectic racing.
Yeah, and it just comes more and more into the race skills as people get more and more refined on their boat handling, and the speed differences become less.
How good, Robbie. It is proper boating that I didn't think I'd ever see, particularly those images of the fleet down in Auckland with that grandstand absolutely packed to the rafters. I think it was some of the most iconic sailing imagery that I think I've ever seen. It was wicked, and just testament to how far SailGP is coming as we speak. It feels like a real moving season in season 5. It's redefining what the sport can look like globally, even compared to season 3 and 4.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think that stadium in Auckland, that was the closest I've been to sailing racing where it felt like a football match. When you got the Kiwis going around the bottom mark, and you could just hear the crowds like shouting. Cool. It was something else. It was pretty cool, and hopefully, like, there's no reason why we can't have that in Portsmouth.
Yes, that's the story, mate. Let's get everyone to Portsmouth. Maybe have a gin and tonic or a beer and start cheering on Emirates GBR.
Yeah, 100%.
I'll be leading the charge there, that's for sure. Hey, Robs, thanks so much for giving up some of your time. I'm so pleased to hear that you're using this downtime without Rio happening to the benefit of the team. More power to all of you guys for that. Really interests me just how you guys are debriefing, having had a talk to Dylan as well, how critical he is on himself, as I'm sure you know that's how he rolls. And really looking forward to see how season 5 ends for Emirates GBR. It's so exciting to be this close and right in the mix, right?
Yeah, 100%. And we're looking forward to the next event. I'm sure there'll be little tweaks. I think all teams, there's always dynamics going on, and you've always got to adapt. And I think you just got to try and learn as fast as you can.
I think we'll leave it with that. Wise words, learn as fast as you can. And we'll wrap up the Inside Tack there. Don't forget to follow us, Emirates GBR and Athena Racing, across all social media platforms. And Robs, thanks so much for joining us in this unplanned mid-season break. But it's really good to have a moment in time to review the first 5 events and look forward to the rest of the season, mate. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. It's been great talking.
Nice one, mate. Join us next time on the Inside Tack.